Okay, I'll begin with the land acknowledgement. St. Mark's Cathedral acknowledges that we gather on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, who are still here, and we honor with gratitude the land itself and the life of the Duwamish tribe. And the opening prayer is from a Holy Island prayer book that I picked up at Lindisfarne this summer on the Celtic pilgrimage. This is one of the prayers for evening under the theme of creation. Earthmaker God, as the hand is made for holding and the eye for seeing, you have fashioned me for joy. Grant me your vision that I may find it everywhere, in the sunlit faces of our world, in the wildflower's beauty, in the lark's melody, in a child's smile, in a mother's love, in the face of a steadfast man. Our society is ever restless, always craving one more thing to do, seeking happiness through more and more possessions. Teach us to be at peace with what we have, to embrace what we have given and received, to know that enough is enough until our strivings cease and we rest content in you alone. Amen.
Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So thank you everyone for joining us, and appreciate your being here, spending time. And we're going to be talking about reduce today. Sort of the reduce, reuse, recycle is our themes for the next few sessions. And what I look at on it is this is really more of a sharing than anything else. So we're going to start with some frameworks about reducing. And then some of the people who are involved fairly frequently with Creation Care are going to share what they're doing. And then we're going to open it up to really a discussion. And then I'll come in after that and just some suggestions on how to reduce. So that's our theme for today. So if we start looking at the fundamental issues that cause us to look at reducing, there's really a tremendous amount of overproduction, which is causing climate change, and a lot of it relates back to people's mindsets and habits. The fashion industry produces between 100 and 150 billion items per year. And if you look in your closet, the average American has more than 100 items in their closet. There was a survey done in Europe, and people in England and I think France have 148 items in their closet. And I'm thinking, oh man, I'm not into fashion, but then I thought about it. How much do I have that I've accumulated over years? And I may not wear it that much, but I've got a lot in my closet. And a lot of people are buying more every year. Americans drive 14,000 miles a year, which is quite a bit. Collectively, we own 267 million cars. That's quite a lot of cars on the road, and more are being sold every year. Globally, there are about 70 billion animals raised for food every year. They use a third of the land, a third of the grain that's produced, and 15% of global fresh water. And if you look at carbon emissions, massive amounts, about a quarter of all our carbon emissions come from food. And a lot of that, I think 14% of carbon emissions comes from eating meat, essentially. Manufacturing produces a lot. And the net result is that there are 58 gigatons of greenhouse gases per year, which is absolutely massive amounts. But along with producing so much, there's a lot that's wasted. Somewhere between 35 and 40% of food in the US is wasted every year. When you look at what spoils in the supermarkets, spoils on the way to markets, people buy too much and throw it away. We go out to eat at restaurants, and we order more, and things are thrown away. So the average person in the US wastes 100 pounds of food every year. And think, okay, I don't do that. But then I started thinking about it. Oh yeah, I may have gone to the restaurant, or I may have thought, okay, it's just this little bit here and there. But on average, it's wasting 100 pounds a year. Americans on average throw away about 81 pounds of clothes every year, most of which is not recyclable. There are more ways coming out to recycle clothing, but a lot is thrown away that is not recyclable. And something like 40% of clothes are disposed of before they're even worn. So people are buying, things like Shine. If you go online, you can buy things for $5 or $10. It's just become so easy. I mentioned cars earlier, and Americans are buying 17 million cars a year and disposing of 12 million. So there's a lot that it gets on the automobile market. And you look at the emissions from gasoline-powered transport. SUVs are a big part of the increase. I look around and I'm surrounded by SUVs and pickup trucks. And so cars have gone from sort of the average sedan that we used to talk about to a lot larger cars that are using a lot more energy to be powered. In the US, our emissions average about 14 tons per person per year, which is at least double the world average. So tremendously large. And the household goods that we use cause 60% of global emissions. So we're wasting a lot. So there's overproduction, but there's also wastage on our part, which is why we look at reducing. So there's the reduce, reuse, recycle, and our focus today is on reducing. Reducing includes looking at how we travel, the electricity we use, the food we eat, the things we buy, and wasting less, but fundamentally buying less in the first place. Because the best way to reduce waste is not to produce things or not to buy items in the first place. So how can we buy less and use less, and then also waste less? It means cutting back on the amount of waste that we generate, and the amount we actually waste, whether it's food or clothes or energy for transportation or heating in our office buildings or anything else. What can we do actually to reduce? There are a lot of benefits to reducing. It lowers carbon emissions, obviously. But things we don't think about, it saves landfill space. I thought about it. I had just the photo initially of the garbage dump. And I thought, oh, that looks pretty horrible. What do I actually want? I want something like the Arboretum, which is the bottom photo. And we can have more Arboretums if we have less landfill. Because otherwise we just need to keep expanding out for all the stuff that we throw away. Reducing really stops the problem at the source. There's less waste to clean up, which is better for us. Reducing prevents the pollution in the first place, which protects the environment. And it's interesting, there was a survey done recently of people, 80 or 90% of America, I think it's 80%, Pew Research found, want to do something to improve the environment. But then the second question in the survey, or question later on, was why are you doing it? And 60% of people were changing their habits to protect the environment in order to save money. And actually just doing it purely for the environment was 20%. So reducing, buying less, wasting less, saves money, which is a key motivator for a lot of people that we often don't think about as we go along. There's a scriptural basis on this as well. I think Kathy's prayer included being happy with what we have. I may be misquoting on it, but something like that. And that really does revert back to the scriptural basis. 1 Timothy, if we have enough food and clothing, let's be content. Let's be content with what we have. We don't need to buy more. And going back to what I said earlier, not buying more is really the foundation for reducing. It's reducing the amount of things that we add on to what we have. We already have a lot of times quite enough. And so we don't really need more, but let us be content with what we have. Luke, life is more than food and your body is more than clothing. I spent part of my year in Singapore. And the big question in Singapore is, do you eat to live or live to eat? And a lot of people live to eat. They just enjoy food and enjoy going out and trying new places. As I said in Luke, life is more than food. You look at people that are constantly involved in fashion and new clothes, your body is more than clothing. And going back to Psalms, if we heap up wealth, we heap up wealth, not knowing who will spend it. Where do I put my hope? My only hope is in you, Lord. So our hope is not in the things we accumulate, the wealth we have, the things that we have around. Our hope is really in the Lord and not in the things. So we don't really need to buy things, buy more. Let's be content with what we have. So some principles on this for how do we look at reducing, and then we'll look at some of the impacts on it and then go into discussion. But principles on it: think before you shop. I know I'm on too many newsletters. My wife teases me all the time about newsletters and ads and that kind of thing. And I see something and think, oh, this is really cool. Oh, this is environmentally friendly. Oh, I should buy this. And it's so tempting to buy new things that come out. But what we really need to do is stop and think. Think before we shop and ask, do we really need it? Do we really love it? And fundamentally think about it. Do we really need it? A lot of times we don't. It sounds really cool. And what that leads into is buy less stuff. Stuff is obviously a technical term. I was trying to think of something else for it. But buying less things is really what we can think about. Sure, we need food to survive. We need water. But we really don't need some of the things that we buy, and we can be content with what we have, going back to scripture. And when we do buy, it's looking at it a bit differently. How can we buy things that are high quality and will last for a long time? Patagonia is obviously famous for that, and there are other stores around that do quite well on the higher quality. And it's not just higher cost, it is higher quality that will last for a long time. There's a real difference between high cost and high quality. And there are some brands that have high quality that are not as expensive. So that's a way of reducing significantly, that if I buy something that will last me 20 years, it's fantastic. I'm get laughed at for wearing things from a long time ago, but some things I have last. Shop local is also reducing in the sense that reducing transport and that reduces emissions as well. Do you buy French wine or Washington State wine? I have a bias here for Washington State wine, and French wine is very good, and Italian wine is very good. But getting Washington State wine to us compared to French wine, do you really need the avocados that get flown in from Mexico, or do you need the vegetables that come in from Mexico out of season at this time of year during the winter? Or can we get things locally? And so we go across, food or transport or other things, buying local. And the fundamental response many times can be no. It's so easy to say yes, I'll do this, or yes, this looks good. But we can say no, we can refuse. We can be efficient, and I'll have some examples in a few minutes, but with driving and devices. If we're driving, how fast do we accelerate and how fast do we stop? If we accelerate faster, we use more fuel. If we're using devices and whether it's phones or laptops or tablets or whatever else it may be, how often do we need to replace them really? Also, there's learning. We can learn more about what actions we can take. That's what we're trying to do with climate conversations. I learned putting these things together. We learn from each other. One of the fascinating things for me in these conversations has been the ideas from people who are participating. And so learning is really important, so we can learn more about how we can reduce or eat differently, or use different transport. And fundamentally, there's a moral and collective responsibility. One of the things I look at is, does one person make a difference? And the answer is yes. If we all say, it's hopeless, we can't do anything, then nothing starts. Collectively, we can do a lot. And there is the moral responsibility, the fundamental principle of creation care, of caring for God's creation. So I just thought, put in some ideas on we don't think about these things necessarily, but 8 things that we can look at. The United Nations actually has some useful things just for personal action in here of what we can do. And some of it relates to energy. So if we put in a heat pump, we save about 2,000 pounds of CO2 emissions per year. We can walk or bike or take public transport. So if we live car-free, very difficult for many of us, we can save 2 tons of carbon emissions per year. And we can look at that and say, well, I can't necessarily live car-free, but I can reduce the amount that I drive by walking or biking in public transport. We can travel less. One long-distance flight uses at least 2 tons, releases 2 tons of carbon emissions per person. I'm vegetarian, so I've got a bias on this, but eat more vegetables. Even Meatless Monday makes a difference. So a vegetarian would save about 1,100 pounds of carbon emissions per year by not eating meat and eating vegetables instead of meat. If we reduce the food waste that we have significantly, another 600 pounds of carbon emissions per year, reducing the amount that we buy. So if we buy 1 pound less of clothing, there's 17 pounds less of carbon emissions that come out. And we can take that across the board for whatever we buy. If we use renewable energy rather than, Seattle has a lot of hydropower. So it may not be as applicable in Seattle, but in the areas around Seattle and in other parts of the country, if we're using renewable energy, we can save a ton and a half of carbon emissions per year. And there are ways, even if you're living in a condominium and you can't put in solar panels or anything else, you can subscribe for renewable energy. And that's another way to do it. And replacing a gasoline car with an electric vehicle saves another 2 tons per year. So there are a lot of different things that we can do in different areas and save quite a bit, by reducing what we do and changing the energy that we use, the food we eat, the things we buy makes a big difference. What I thought we'd do is ask several people. So Carolyn, Kathy, Marjorie, and Ruth, I think, offered when asked to share some of what they're doing. And so maybe start, and then what I'd like to do after that is really open it up to the group on suggestions to reduce. And I've got some more later that we can come back to, but I think there's a lot of ideas within the group that we can say, what do I do practically in my life to reduce? Marjorie, Carolyn, Ruth, Kathy, one of you want to start? Marjorie,
I can go, sure. I was waiting for Carolyn because she's already unmuted, but that's okay. I don't have much to say, except the first thing that came to my mind when we talked about this topic was that for a long time, I've just tried to be more efficient in my driving. And I mean, I've done that for years, and I'm sure many of us have. To think about, well, okay, if I'm going to QFC, then I'll go to the post office and I'll make that stop at Bartell's or whatever, all at the same time. And then the other thing, and then also combine, I'll ask my husband, what are you doing today? And how can we, not be covering the same roads at the same time in our gasoline cars? And I try to walk a lot as well. And I live within walking distance of a Safeway that is not my favorite store, but it's a good spot. And I also live kind of within walking distance of a local produce stand in the Roosevelt area that I like. So just try to get my exercise in and do a little bit of shopping at the same time or whatever I have to do. So that was just my little thought there. And as I started doing it long ago, mostly thinking about efficiency as but it's worked. So
Thanks, Marjorie. I think I could pretty much ditto all that you said, especially in terms of combining stops and errands. And I live probably 6 blocks, 8 blocks downhill from a group of shops. Then I have to walk back up the hill. But I've gotten myself to a point that that's what I will do rather than take my car out of the garage and drive it. I also went to the grocery store today for the first time in a couple weeks and bought no meats. I bought some grains, so I'm going to make some things that are grain-based and well, grain, I guess is the best way. Things like cannellini beans and red kidney beans and things like that. And I'm really working to try to understand what makes a complete protein. I have a lovely kale and carrot soup. I would love to pass on to anybody. I should have made it available to put out here just because it tastes so good and it is completely meat-free. Many, many soups can be meat-free. This furry guy that just jumped in my lap, unfortunately, he does get some meat in his feet because I'm trying to get him up to 9 pounds. The other thing I would just say is briefly, I'm an elder and I'm confronting the great quantities of things that my husband and I acquired, moved from one house to another through, 40 some years. And I've heard this from many people. And now it's our responsibility to somehow pass that along. And it's very daunting. So if I'd had this mindset 30 years or more ago, I would not be facing this very daunting task at present. I will end with that.
Thank you. Kathy or Ruth? Kathy.
I'll go. So let's see, 3 categories. I'll start with the car. So ditto for Marjorie and Carolyn on combining errands and walking into local shops. So I'm doing that more. I had leased my car and I had an opportunity to buy a new one the end of 2021. And I was really torn because I wanted to get an SUV to be able to go to the mountains, but I didn't like the gas mileage. So I've kept I bought instead my Honda Civic hatchback. So I kept, it's used, right? So I just already driven it for 3 years and I bought out the lease. And because it gets up to 44 miles on the highway. So why would I change that? And I realized, well, I'm not going to go to the mountains by myself. I've got plenty of friends that have SUVs. So that's how I resolved that problem. And then on clothes, I have not bought many new clothes. Now, part of that is because of the pandemic.
Mhm.
Part of it is because I retired in July of 2021. But also, I already have so many clothes, it's ridiculous. So, and thankfully, I bought a lot of high quality clothes, so I can still use them. So I've basically been shopping in my closet. And when I buy, mostly I buy at my local consignment store, which also has high quality used clothes. So, and I give clothes away, or I consign with them, and then I am giving things to Goodwill. So that's on that one. And then print. So books, I'm buying way less books. So I have a book club and we do a book a month. And my practice had been just to buy the book and then sell it back to Third Place Books or something like that. But now I'm using the library, except when I can't get the book in time. So, but it's a rhythm, right? So now it's a habit, and it's like, why didn't I do this before? But now I'm doing it. And then I also am down to just one magazine subscription. I like to read, and so I used to have more than that, but now it's just one. And then I now have digital daily newspaper, although I still get the Sunday newspaper in print, but that's so much less paper. All of those things, those last two things combined. So those are 3 examples of reducing.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm next, I guess. Actually, I didn't know I was going to be talking, but I got lots of ideas as I was listening, of course. Where I live is in a retirement community, and it's on First Hill. I can walk to all kinds of places. It can take the bus at night from Benaroya Hall back up to Horizon House. Or I can take the bus. I mean, the bus is a block away. And I can walk to the grocery store, and I have a cart so I can carry things that way. But I also use my car because I usually shop every 2 weeks and need a car to carry that much stuff. So I'll give some examples of how we all have to decide what's going to work for us, kind of thing. I happened today to cook a whole bunch of chickpeas because I'm going to make myself hummus. So I just thought of that while I was listening tonight. I had lunch with friends in the dining room here, and I had an Impossible Burger, which I really do like. It's very, very tasty, and it's not meat, but that doesn't mean I don't eat meat. I almost never eat beef, but I like pork. I eat chicken, I eat eggs, I do some things, and I don't do everything. Now, here's another example of being very human. Because it's just me in my apartment, and I don't like to put dirty dishes in the dishwasher. So I do rinse them off well enough that I often pull them back out and use them from there rather than myself. So I'm not using up my dishes as fast, but I mean, it's just an example. But I'll have to tell you, every time I'm running that water, rinsing a dish, I'm aware that that's what I'm doing. I'm not really feeling guilty, but I'm conscious that try not to, run it unnecessarily, but I'm at least that's the way I deal with that one. I have a pretty good feeling that I'm not going to need another car. I've had a Prius since 2002. I mean, not the same one, but my Prius now is a 210, and I'm just thinking, if I was going to get another car, it would definitely be electric, but I'm going to see if I don't need another one. Clothes is a really handy thing for me because we have what's called a Monday market here in Horizon House, and there's all kinds of used clothing there. And I think that 75% of my wardrobe comes from there, and anyway, and I like that. And then I'm notorious for asking people for any blank-sided paper that they have. I collect it and I use it myself for printing on the back side. I do that all the time. And I've switched to paying all my bills online and stuff like that. So there's something I haven't followed up on, which is, and I did this once, was with catalog choice, was stopping, deciding what to stop in the way of things, catalogs that I didn't really want to receive. But I haven't done it lately, and I think it's time for me to look into that again. So that's my mix. That's my mix of report.
Fantastic. Now, really good ideas from people. Thank you very, very much. And let me just open it up for other ideas that people have from our group tonight.
Well, I can go.
Great.
For starters, I live in a co-housing community, and the land here was bought by the founders 30 years ago. So most of our housing is on a septic system, and we cannot add more houses to that, or the county would yank our grandfathered zoning, and we'd look like suburbia everywhere else. So we don't want to do that. So it enables us to raise our own chickens for eggs, and then our chickens, when they stopped laying about 6 months ago, got to be recycled into our food program. And we get about 10,000 pounds a year out of our garden. We have quite a large garden, and we feed the community largely out of the garden. But we do have a food program where we buy wholesale from UNFI, and we have about 150 items that we buy from UNFI that, as a member of the food program, we can just go into our pantries and take things off the shelf, and we pay a monthly fee of about $200 a month for the shopping that we do. And then we have 20 meals a month included in that, which are by and large organic, because if we buy stuff and the shoppers buy organic, as well as our garden is permaculture and organic. So they've done the research on our food program, and we come out to about 60% less than the Department of Agriculture figure of how much an single adult spends on food per month. So we save a lot of money as well as eat quite well. We share some cars, we share a laundry. We just we recycle food, or clothing or books or other things. We share rides going to places. We try and be aware of these issues, and I think we do a pretty good job. That's it for me.
Really nice. Mary?
I want to put a plug in. I've forgotten which person mentioned this, but dealing with your possessions before they are inherited by whoever survived you. As one who has been in the position of the inheriting, anything that can be done is a blessing. I luckily have 3 siblings, so I never had to do it all by myself. We did discover some things that were really fun about getting rid of stuff. My mother had an enormous cookbook collection, and at some point she started asking every person who came to visit her to pick a book out of the cookbook shelves. So she gave them away to people who wanted them. You know, it was not a mass getting rid of, but it slowly reduced it. She had an enormous quantity of photographs She had taken pictures of everything everywhere. And there were a lot of pictures that we didn't even know who the people were in them. And when we had her memorial service, we covered an entire table with photographs and invited everybody to take pictures that they wanted. And there were people not only taking pictures for themselves, but recognizing people that weren't at the memorial service that they could send the pictures to. And it made a whole lot of fun conversation around the table. So that was another fun thing to do. After my dad died, my mom had ideas about who should get certain of his things. So that was also a thing that she went through of getting rid of stuff. So there's some ways to make the lightening the load go better. I'll tell one funny story that my parents had 1 million books, and when they moved out of a house they'd been in 42 years, they went through the books and identified a huge quantity that they did not want to keep. And my other siblings had a garage sale, and all the books that were not sold at the garage sale were put in the boxes that my parents wanted to keep, filled 56 boxes. Wow. And one of my siblings had found a bulk buyer of secondhand books who would take all of the books. And when he got there and he saw how many books there were, he started trying to back out of the deal. And I wasn't there for this, but basically my brother kept putting them in his truck while my sisters persuaded him that he could not do anything about it. So sometimes you have to be a little forceful, but none of that stuff got thrown away, at least not on the first pass. The thing I'm trying to do for myself with books, and it's actually not easy, is to work on a zero-sum basis, so that if I buy a book, I have to get rid of a book. And books go to Goodwill or half price books. I guess Third Place buys books. There's a few places, actually Half Price doesn't exist anymore. Twice Told Tales on Harvard and Denny, I think, on Capitol Hill will buy books, although there's some books they don't buy that people try to sell them. So
Now,
there are
half-price books. There's 3 half-price books that bought a bunch of mine 2 weeks ago, and
Oh.
there's one in Linwood.
there
So there
used
were
to be one
3 in a
the
Google
district.
search, and they still bought books. I mean, they get to decide and pay you on the spot,
Right.
but they took care of the rest that they didn't want. And no, they're
So-
still in business.
The university location and the Capitol Hill location are gone.
Okay.
So trying to work on a zero-sum basis for some possessions. I'm also trying to do that with LPs and CDs, which are already old technology, I know, but I still have them. Still trying to limit the accumulation, even if I can't yet get rid of what I've got.
Good ideas. Others?
By the way, I use Audible books a lot, and there's a free Audible library service as well, and that can cut down on the urge to buy books.
No.
Libby Chirp is another one.
Chirp?
Mhm,
I haven't heard of that one.
CHIRP. And they tend to not be the newest books, but they are much, much cheaper than Audible.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Thank
Right.
you.
You can also get a lot of Audible books from your library.
Right. It's in a program called Libby.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
An app.
Yeah, I've heard about Libby. I've not used it yet, so I've got to do that. But yeah, I'm a library user. I love it. So, you know, I was an inveterate Seattle Times reader, and I've started reading on my tablet, and it's actually working for me. So surprised myself.
I can
Well,
say,
Yeah.
first of all, I'm a former public library trustee I'm from Whatcom County. That's where I live. And I just, as of last month, my term as library trustee ended. But one of the things, it's really, really important to realize just how efficient reading books online on screens is than reading books on paper. I was in software for too many years. And I went through the transition of going from distributing software on tapes and CDs and things like that to distributing it online. And when we went through that transition, our accountants had a fit because they couldn't figure out how to charge for things that we were software that we were distributing online. They used to be able to look at, oh, you got to put things in the warehouse, you got to haul it from one end of the country to the other, all of those kinds of things. And now that's all gone. And so basically it didn't cost anything to deliver a piece of software to one of our customers. And that same thing applies to books. When you buy a book online, there's no warehousing, there's no manufacturing of the physical book, all of those things. And all of those things take energy and carbon. So that if you can, I know a lot of people, including me, look at what's behind me, like physical books, but there are so many advantages to reading on screens that, if you don't do that, think about it, because there are tremendous benefits from it.
Or listening. Would you say the same thing about listening to books?
Absolutely. It's the same thing. What you don't want to do is have these physical objects that you have to carry around and people have to store, and they have to be transported and manufactured and all of those things. If you can avoid that, you're saving a tremendous amount of energy and resources. So,
Marv, I'm going to piggyback on that and just say, in a recent tour I had of the Washington Library for the Visually Impaired and Blind People, which is a statewide service, although its main library is in downtown Seattle, it actually streams out immediately within like 24 hours any book to a patron that they request. So it's a wonderful service. Make sure you put that back in here for people that you might know who need access to printed or to, how do you say it, written materials or other materials.
mhm.
So thanks for making that point.
I'm going to spend a few minutes just going through some more ideas with the slides. And people have fantastic ideas, and I'm sort of sitting here writing things down. If I don't write it down, I'll totally forget in terms of what we're doing. But let me try to go through a few things, and we'll have more time at the end as well. So sort of categorizing it, part of it is living differently. We've talked about digital and reducing paper, public transport, and reducing driving. Some good ideas on that. I saw our neighbors walking one day in a different direction than where they always go, and they said, "Oh yeah, we're walking to the supermarket today." Rethinking differently. Shorter shower. We've probably all, most of us have LED light bulbs at home, but turning off the lights as well. Looking at the temperature setting, it's always nice to be a little bit warmer, but saying, can we reduce it a degree or so? And same thing for laundry, the way we drive. Buying fewer gadgets and clothes, there's always the pressure to buy a new phone and buy a new thing. Keeping your car longer. Cars actually last a long time. There's like, okay, Ruth has talked about it and Kathy's talked about it on, what do we actually buy and what do we use, and keeping it longer. Our phones last longer. It seemed to be like they used to be on the 2-year cycle if they automatically broke as soon as my warranty was out after a year or two. Now they do last longer, and I'm using phones for 4 or 5 years. So that's a possibility. There's the replacing old and inefficient appliances. I saw something recently on, is your refrigerator, is it better to buy a new refrigerator or keep the one you have? And there's some ways there's some websites to look at on that. If your refrigerator is 10, 15 years old, it's lasted that long. Even though you're throwing things away, it may be more efficient overall. So there's some calculations around that. People talked about pre-loved and the used things that they buy. Amazon Renewed, I hadn't known about that till my daughter mentioned it to me. And so, that's a possibility for those of us who shop on Amazon. Less packaging, I think someone mentioned, buying things with less packaging and really looking at that and, taking your lunch with you when you're going to events. We can avoid the plastic containers and the straws, bring our own mugs when we go out for coffee. I'm trying to do better on that. I still forget at times. Avoiding the long distance traveling. Washington State parks are wonderful, and we've got some beautiful national parks around us. So going closer rather than further away. Reducing the water and electricity usage for our laundry with full loads and a drying rack. Sharing a home. We've got an excellent example of how that works in action. We were asking my daughter if she needed help with rental costs. She lives in San Francisco, and she said, no, I share with people because I like sharing better. I don't want to live on my own. We were totally surprised. So that is becoming more of a trend, and we have the excellent example from today. We can reuse. The reusable bottles for the water that we have. There are ways to repair the things that we have. There's some groups that will help you repair. There's sewing that you can do. There's furniture repair. So we don't always need to buy new things just because something isn't working like it used to be. And then upcycling things that, turning things that we've used, it's the clothing into dust rags is the obvious example, but a lot else that we can do as well. Reducing food waste. So we talked about that. I think it was last June. We had the session talking about food with the meal plan, having the shopping list, sticking to the shopping list. The stores are really good about putting things for you to buy on impulse buying as you walk into the store. Avoid that. Storing the food safely so that it lasts longer. We don't need to there's a use by or best by date. So it still lasts longer than that. So it's learning about how to save things longer. Freezing food or eating leftovers. I'm going to ask Carolyn later for her kale and carrot soup recipe. So hopefully I can get that. So those are some ideas along the way, and we'll have this together. One thing I look at, I want to share this quote before then on the next slide before I go back into the discussion. But I love the Dalai Lama's quote. Anyone who thinks that they're too small to make a difference has never tried to fall asleep with a mosquito in the room. I love that quote.
It's funny.
And then, Greta, do we make a difference? Look at what Greta Thunberg has done. One person sitting in front of Parliament in, where was it, Sweden, and she's become a force of nature at the age of 16 or something like that. It's incredible, and the movement that she's inspired. One person has made this tremendous difference. So there's really a lot that we can do. And I just sort of went through a whole list of things very, very quickly, and hopefully that has some ideas in there. Some of which we've talked about, some of which may be new that we can do, and a lot of it is changing mindset. I think Marv was talking about what we can do on digital books, and then digital listening. So a lot of opportunities in there, and it's changing how we think about things. Elizabeth, And open up the discussion, starting with Elizabeth.
Yeah, this is me again. It's Libby, but I know that somehow it got registered Elizabeth. You know, the big laundry jugs. We've replaced those with a strip that's about like that size. That's laundry detergent with all the water removed. And they come stacked up like little wafers in a box, and you just put one of those on top of your clothes and does just as good a job. And there's no big jug to get rid of. And then the other thing I do is I buy this, I can't have my coffee without half and half. So I have to get this at this bottle. It's a pint. And when it's empty, I wash it out real good. And then I have I put water, I filter water through a Brita filter, and that's what's in my refrigerator door, chilled filtered water. And I always reuse those. So I never buy bottled water, if in general.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and part of it is if we're running events as well, encouraging people to bring their own water bottles and not using as many cups. And that's something that we don't think about as much. It's just we automatically put out, cups and don't ask people to come with their own. If it's events at church or other places. And so it's changing mindset on that as well, of just reducing the amount that we
Right.
provide people. Yeah, but that's a good idea, Libby. Thank you. Other ideas people have on or examples of things you're doing?
Something that's affected me a lot is a couple of years ago, I bought an electric bike. And
Electric what?
electric bicycle.
Oh, bike.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for anything less than 5 or 6 miles, I ride my bike. And that's our gas bills have gone way down with that. I live in a fairly rural area, so 5 miles is about how far I have to go to get anything. So, but that bike has really helped because it's so much easier. It means that I've always had a bike, but the decision to ride is hard if you know that you're going to get sweaty and all of those things. But on an electric bike, it's pedaled and you get exercise, but it just takes the sting out of it. And so I find myself using gasoline so much less.
Nice.
Hmm.
I live near Ballard, and the parking in Ballard for a bicycle is a lot easier to find than parking for a car as well. So
Absolutely.
you go further in the city, you may not go as far, but helps on that side too.
And in a place like Seattle with all the hills, makes it a lot easier if you've got that extra boost.
Yes, and the same thing. So yeah, I can identify. Yeah, definitely helps. Other ideas people have? Okay. Edie?
Yeah, I just want to bring up the idea of a tipping point of exposure to making change. And so my example, which might sound kind of silly, but it's real. When our son arrived home from college and told me the night before I was going to cook Christmas dinner that he was vegan and wouldn't eat anything that I had planned to prepare, that it was kind of a big deal to be figuring that out every time he visited. Well, he had the opportunity to spend 3 weeks here in the past month, as you might know, and cooked a lot for me, and it was delicious. And I sort of thought, wow, I could tip right over into this. Maybe not every night, but certainly on a much more regular basis than I had really thought that I could or would. So, yeah, so that felt good as a step to take.
Nice. Yeah, last month was Veganuary, Vegan January. And there's a Veganuary cookbook. Marjorie, I'll send that to you too. That has some substitutes in there and all kinds of things. So more ideas in there. And we should get a
Give you
George, yeah.
something for the kitchen. I've been a plant-based eater for over 10 years and haven't had meat or fish or anything for 15. And I've started doing my own sprouts, which are actually higher in vitamins than a lot. And all you do is you rinse them twice a day, put them back. Within 4 days, you've got your fresh greens to be eating. You don't have to buy anything in a container. And I just reuse bottles that I've got, canned bottles from like pickles and stuff to do it with. So there's things you can do in the kitchen that reduce the amount of packaging that you purchase as well. So like we'll make our own, I make my own bars, protein bars, just with nuts, dates, and oats and cacao. So there's lots of things in the kitchen that you can do. Or my wife, as far as clothing, she sews. So I haven't bought clothing for several years. Everything I have is stuff that she's made for me. And she's often getting that. She's found places that give away extra drops of like outdoor fabric and the like. And so they're just throwing it away. So she gets to collect it and she makes things, and all the kids and nephews and nieces, they all get custom clothing, which they always love. And so there's some ideas in the house to use less.
George, those are fantastic ideas. I'll follow your thing on sprouts. I hadn't thought about that as much, but it actually sounds easier than I thought. Good. Okay, well, thank you everyone very much for the ideas. And John, one more, sorry.
I love your date bar recipe, George.
Very tasty too.
If you can send that to Marjorie, maybe Marjorie can share it for us. So if you're willing to share.
I think we should start a recipe exchange.
Yeah.
This is sounding good, exactly, yeah.
Well, can I just say, Richard, on behalf of Richard and Kathy and some of us in the Creation Care Ministry at St. Mark's, really, it's great to see Marv and George and some other faces here that I don't recognize from St. Mark's. And I'm always hesitant to say that because at St. Mark's, it's a big enough place that you don't necessarily know every face. But I just wanted to say how much we appreciate having some new faces here, and it's really great. So, and George, I know I've seen you before at Earth Ministry gatherings, and I can't remember if you're from the Seattle area or not.
Out in Gig Harbor area.
Right. Cool.
And Marjorie, I will say it's been lovely to have JB Hoover with us. JB Hoover behind the gardens at St. Andrew's Church and behind so many sustainable actions, both in the Seattle area and then also with our sister diocese over in the Philippines. So JB, I don't see you right at the moment, but lovely to see you today.
Great. And we're up to about the end. So Carolyn, do you have a prayer to close us out?
Yes, we're going to move ahead some centuries in terms of prayers and poetry. Kathy began with a Celtic prayer. I've been reading Mary Oliver recently, and when I read her poem last night, When I Am Among the Trees, it made me think of the couple of the lessons that were part of Sunday service, as well as the sermon, and that is the reference to light. So she begins, when I am among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locust, equally the beech, the oaks and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would almost say that they save me, and daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself in which I have goodness, and discernment, and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me, the trees stir in their leaves and call out, stay a while. The light flows from their branches and they call out again, it's simple, they say. And you too have come into the world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light, and to shine. I will add an amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone for joining us today, and have a wonderful rest of the evening. But thanks for the
It's-
ideas. I
Yeah,
picked up
thank
some-
you, everybody.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to see new faces too.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Great.
Good night.